homophobia, sexism, religion, and this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights, highlight the issue. Talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Momentarily for class solidarity, cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed, deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion, in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights, highlight the issue. Talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. This is TNS Live. You know, every Tuesday we do something live. We do an extended conversation here on all the platforms. Then we move it over to Rockfin to continue that conversation. So if you're not already on Rockfin, go join us. Rockfin.com/Nomiki. That's where you're going to get the full extended conversation with some of our favorite guests. You know, our regular show, we have brief little conversations. They're wonderful. But this is where we get to actually go dive deep into the issues. TNS Live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. I am here in Puerto Rico right now. I'm losing my voice if you can't tell. That's been a fun little aspect of my trip. I'm here doing the documentary. I think a lot of you guys know this already, but if you don't, I've been working on a documentary for 4 whole years. Oh my gosh, it's coming to light. It's coming together. You should have something, I don't know, in this lifetime, I suppose, but it's been a very lively trip. I thought I was asking more questions than I was talking, but I'm losing my voice, so I'm not sure if that's actually happening at this point. I'm clearly not in the studio, but got the Puerto Rican flag in the background, so representing well. And I gotta give shout outs to my dear friend Fede for coming to save the day, because in the middle of Majority Report today, the Wi-Fi, I don't know if it was Wi-Fi or if it was the new platform we were using, but it wasn't working, and they were like, no, you gotta go. So we had to figure it out, and my dear friend Fede came to save the day and offered his space. So thank you. Thank you for all of that. Today we are going to have a great conversation about the comfort. This is like the whole deal, right? Like, this has been going on for years. How are you going to pay for that? Oh, okay. How are you going to pay for that? Well, $800 million justifiably can go to Ukraine, but how are you going to pay for Medicare for all? How are you going to pay for public schools? How are you going to pay for all these things when we have a crisis, an economic crisis? This is the ongoing rhetoric. We have the guy on who wrote the book. You know him from The American Prospect. Ryan Cooper is managing editor at The American Prospect, the co-host and producer of Left Anchor podcast, and now his new book out is titled How are you going to pay for that? Smart answers to the dumbest questions in politics. Ryan, thank you for joining. We're going to start off the conversation a little bit. We're going to move over, take a little break, move over to Rockfin. So thank you for joining us. You've got a whole studio set up there because you've got a podcast.
My pleasure. Yeah, I mean, studios maybe putting it a little generously. All of the mess is carefully arranged out of frame. But
If it
I
makes
did
you
what I
feel
could.
better, I was watching CNN today. I haven't, because I'm here doing the documentary all week and I've missed a lot. And I was watching CNN and Leon Panetta was on, and I'm like, Leon Panetta. I mean, like, are you serious? His office, I was like, it was a disaster zone. It was like, he's on CNN and I wanted to screenshot it. Be like, clean up your office before you go on air, buddy.
Yeah,
Things.
just scoop it into a trash bag or something. It's too much for some people. I think that viral moment. You remember at the BBC when that guy was doing the interview and his kids barged in, and we thought, oh, that's so funny.
So
Now
cute.
that's just normal. Everybody's like that now.
So
They got their
cute.
cats. My cat's gonna barge in here in a minute. There's just no getting around it. But
It's levity.
fair warning.
It's all good. It's better than the power going out. Last year when it was here, the power was going out like every hour or so, and we had to deal with it. I would just it is what it is. I had tethered to my phone. It is what it is. We're
Yeah.
all patient. We're desperate for content, so we're just gonna stick around and watch. It's like millennials. Millennials and Zoomers. They can now they can deal with it. So Ryan, you got this new book out. The ongoing topic of how you're going to pay for it. I guess the first question I have for you is why did you decide to delve into this question, this stereotypical question that pops up?
Well, I was guaranteed millions of dollars, and no, of course. I mean, the point of the book, aside from the kind of tongue-in-cheek title, was to sort of put a nice bow on about 8 years of articles I had been writing for various publications.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to sort of set forth a vision of the economy, that like how society works and how the economy works, in a way to sort of that would be sort of useful for my kind of target audience, almost, is like normie Democratic Party moms, like
Mm-hmm.
people who have sort of social justicey views about stuff, but maybe captured by, I remember Matt Iglesias, trigger warning, Matt Iglesias, he was tweeting today about he found an old moveon.org campaign they were doing back in like 2006, I think, and then they were trolling George W. Bush about the budget deficit, and these guys are the left-wing crusaders back in the day, and so basically, I'm trying to advance like a picture of the economy to replace, sort of Bill Clintonism, Reaganism, the view of the economy as being this sort of like machine that you have to sort of sacrifice yourself to. You've got to go to college and pick a major that is profitable. Just make that prediction for the next 40 years. If there's no jobs in your town, you got to move to a new town, and basically setting up an argument for the economy as a social and political construct, that the economy is a government program, basically, right down to the root of it, that it's all created on a foundation of government policy. Government policy, people forget this, includes property rights. It includes corporate law. It includes securities law, labor law, all of these things that like the daily business of businesses around the country depend on at every stage, to adjudicate disputes about who owns what, and what contracts mean. Contracts don't enforce themselves. You need the courts, and what's at the bottom, the back of the enforcement arm of the courts? It's the barrel of the gun at the end of the day. That people will barge into your business or your house if you violate court orders, and they will take your stuff. Armed agents of the state. And so, what I want to do is put forth a picture of the economy as not just, being a social contract, but a thing that we can change. We can change in many ways. We could make it so, for example, in Puerto Rico, there's reliable power delivery, that the electricity doesn't go out because you don't neglect the grid and leave it dependent on heavy oil power plants for 40 years and then don't fix the damage after a massive hurricane just obliterates, half the infrastructure. That, among many other examples, we could get into that later, but human choices, human arrangements. So it's a social system that we've all created ourselves together, and we can change it if we want to.
It's interesting you mentioned that, and obviously we're not going to be talking about Puerto Rico in depth, but there is something very fascinating about this island that I'm on right now, and maybe I'm a little bit in too deep, so I don't want to make people lead them down the rabbit hole of when things went wrong here. But there is, I mean, you mentioned the energy grid, and I'm glad that you mentioned oil, because the privatization of the power authority here essentially was a lead up of government mismanagement, without a doubt. Like, you can't sit here and say the government has mismanaged it. There was unions who were reliant on oil and gas, and I'm glad you mentioned oil and gas, because there is definitely this is something that's happening on the mainland, of course, where labor unions, some that are well-intentioned and reformist and some that are just not, who are resistant to, say, getting off of oil and gas. I mean, we see it being played out right now in the conversation about Ukraine. There is this kind of fight between sometimes labor and aspects of labor, and recognizing that there's potential to, yes, go full force with the anti-privatization government model, but also reforming. How, I mean, I know that sounds a lot like, but like, how do we pay for it is a great example. Like, we have the money to do certain things, but sometimes that money is unable to get outside of existing flawed systems that haven't reformed, and it gives the right wing an opportunity to say, oh, see, it doesn't work, let's privatize.
Yeah, I mean, Puerto Rico honestly isn't a bad example for the type of thing I've been talking about. You know, I don't know where folks may come down in the statehood versus like independence question. But what you can say about Puerto Rico is that it is a colony. It is under the subjugation of the United States government. That's come in different flavors over the years. It was like pretty good in the New Deal when they were like building up the infrastructure. I think it's been pretty bad over the last decade. But there are no senators from Puerto Rico. There's no members of Congress, and
it's commissioner,
quite distant from the center of government authority. And in 2015, 2016, when Obama put the promesa, like they call it the junta down there, right? They people just had to sit down and take it. They couldn't call up their political representatives because there were no political representatives. And I think what the story of Puerto Rico shows, being a lot more poor than the mainland United States, is that when you have places within like a sort of political unit, the United States of America, in which certain parts of it are just sort of like taken outside of that, where like DC is kind of a special case because it's right at the center of the metropole, but Puerto Rico being outside of it and neither able to like influence the sort of the democratic representatives, but also not able to chart its own course in a way that an independent country might do. You're sort of stuck in this limbo space, and the result is that you have stuff that's just left to rot for so many years. A place that's running on heavy oil power plants that were set up in like the 1940s and 1950s. I mean, I'm not an expert on Puerto Rico by any stretch of the imagination, but nobody is updating these things. Nobody is saying like, hey, we got a super windy and a super sunny part of the Caribbean, and we could just be doing renewable gangbusters and getting off
Yeah.
of this, and by the way, very expensive heavy oil
Extremely.
fuel that's got to be delivered with ships and then pumped in. I mean, it's a crazy way to do your electricity generation. And I think, to sort of answer your question there, when you don't address these sort of fundamental questions about political legitimacy and political authority and how people, are governed, how nations are governed, people turn inward. They become selfish. They think, well, I'm just going to get for me and mine, and I'm the building trades guys, and I'm just going to get pipelines because that's jobs for me and my family, and the hell with the climate. That's not my problem. I'll be dead, you'll be dead. And like, maybe that's fake news anyway. It lends itself, I think, to a lack of solidarity. If you don't have a belief, like if it is the case that nobody's looking out for you and your island will just sort of be left to rot based on the political dynamics of a government that you have no influence over, people, they I mean, kind of logically, they turn away from these sort of like grand projects of saying like, we need to totally overhaul the way that we generate our electricity and so forth. And I think you see it in a lot of different aspects, because you think about, I live in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia, and we're pretty enfranchised. It's a swing state and whatnot. Like our votes for president count. If you live in, red state or a blue state, they don't count. It doesn't matter who you vote for whoever you want. And I think that, that inculcates the same kind of thinking.
It's interesting because I'm glad that you mentioned like the renewable energy aspect, because and I'm just using Puerto Rico as an example. This could be, I think it's just a glaring example, and it could be relevant all over the country. But the PREPA, before that's the power authority that it's now LUMA, but PREPA was the Public Power Authority. It went off of renewables. It was renewable focused, and then the neoliberals essentially took hold, rebranded it, turned it into this oil. The oil and gas lobby got in and turned it into an oil reliant authority. And around the same time that neoliberals around the world took hold power within specifically Democratic parties. So I guess like I'm just looking at, I see in the background right now, I'm looking at President Biden in this very precarious position right now. I know you wrote this book a while ago and you could have anticipated, I mean, maybe you could have actually, it's been going on for a bit, this tension, but did we all anticipate the Ukraine situation happening to this extent? Maybe not, but it is over energy, right? And again, it's like, if we had actually seriously dealt with some, I mean, would we be completely off of oil at this point? No. But would we have some sort of achievable goal and maybe not be in this proxy war with Russia? Maybe not. But how does that loop into, it's very relevant to today, how does that loop into how do we pay for it?
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up, actually. One of the biggest sort of narratives around how you're going to pay for that has to do with like the budget deficit. I mean, that's sort of the central, I mean, the book isn't entirely about that, but this is the question that people will ask. It's like when they're hectoring Bernie Sanders about Medicare for all, how are you going to pay for that?
Mm-hmm.
And that means like whenever you're doing a program, you need to account for it dollar for dollar with taxes beforehand. But when you look at something like green energy in the context of 2022, Vladimir Putin it's not a coincidence he's doing this invasion at the moment when gas prices are at record high. He did the same thing in 2008 in Georgia because it gives him tremendous leverage. He's got tremendous money. It's coming in now. The Europeans need that gas and that oil, especially the gas, so badly that they can't even turn it off. Even though that, like they've turned off just about everything else. Back in 2008, you had this massive recession, the global financial crisis. And in the pinch, people were panicking. You had the stimulus package in uh, a small one in Europe, a medium-sized one in the United States, but it wasn't nearly as big as it needed to be. It was probably less than half the size of the hole that it was intended to fill, the Recovery Act in 2009. And the result of that was we had a decade of economic stagnation, the worst economic performance in American history, I think, over that decade. We were headed for a Great Depression, and we fixed half of it, and then we just let the other half just sit and fester for an entire decade. I did some calculations, you can read them in the book, that by 2019 we were about 15% off the previous growth trajectory. If you calculate from 1947 to 2007, we had real growth, real GDP growth at about 2.2% per year, and it kinked down by about 35%, something like that. So at the end of that 11 years after that, in 2019, we were about 15%. That's our gap from the previous trend line. That's bigger than the GDP of California and Virginia put together. Jesus. And that is not just sort of like lost jobs and stuff. That's a lost opportunity. What you could be doing when you're faced with an economic crisis like this, which is a sort of self-perpetuating collapse of spending, where like you have a financial crisis, people are thrown out of work, they lose their income and they stop spending, and that reduces sales at other businesses, and so they lay people off, and so on and so on. It was a lost opportunity to make investments in things. Well, what would be the most logical investment to have back in 2009? It would be crash green energy projects and research, to develop like modular thorium nuclear reactors, or like concentrated solar, salt generation facilities, or like big batteries where you...
Wasn't that Obama's goal? Wasn't there this whole solar project that went down?
No, I mean, they did some of that, but they did, maybe 10% of what it would, like the Recovery Act was about a third tax cuts. It was a bunch of highway spending, and they had about $90 billion in green research and stuff. Not nothing, but not, I think $900 billion would be where I would start, doing something like that.
Billion?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Christy Romer, the one of the administration economists that we brought on, who was politically naive, she did some back of the envelope calculations and came up with a total estimated figure of 1.8 trillion. Larry Summers bullied her down into cutting her ask because basically of neoliberal ideology. And more to the point, the guy Reed Hunt, if you've read the book A Crisis Wasted, he was a fundraiser for Obama, and that got him some buy-in with the administration. And he came in with an idea that we should do a green infrastructure bank. Basically, according to the rules of the budget process, you can appropriate some money, then you can leverage that to make loans. And so you can do loans that are $9 of stimulus for every dollar of appropriation. And Tim Geithner and Larry Summers just dismissed him out of hand. Didn't happen. And that was because, now we're talking about, this is communism. This is big government. This is what we decided we weren't doing in Bill Clinton's term. And so now, this is a major point of the book. Now we're paying for it. Now we're paying for the things that we didn't do, the choices that we failed to make, all of the problems that we left rot, that are like Puerto Rico turned up to 1,000. And enabled Putin. And now in the pinch, when we need that green energy, and we could need it very badly, suddenly it's like we're doing it at the worst possible time, when all the commodity prices are really high, and all the construction workers and the miners and stuff have been out of work for a decade, and we have to do everything really fast. And it's just, I mean, I wrote probably 50 of these articles about how we need stimulus, from about 2009 to 2016, 17 or something like that, just beating my head against the wall saying, we're going to regret this. It doesn't really feel great to be proved right in this particular situation. But Anyway,
Congratulations, you win a Pulitzer, but you're going to die in 2 years of climate change, so you can't even have your grandchildren's go look at it. You're on your gravestone.
I could also be killed in a nuclear exchange. Let's
There's
be
so
optimistic.
many options here right now. I mean, I'm in New York, so I think I'm normally in New York right now in Puerto Rico, but I'm in New York, so I feel like I'm on the table first. And my whole goal is, before we go to break, just want everybody to think about doom and gloom for a second. I don't want to be like in Westchester. I want to be in it. I don't want to have like cancer for 30 years. Just take me out. Like, that's it. If I have one ask, that's it. I don't want to, it's not worth it. We're going to take a quick break, Ryan Cooper.
Okay.
We're just really positive here, thinking about all the the options. How are we going to pay for that? Yeah. I mean, it's more like that was the excuse used that led to our demise. Isn't it silly? Ryan Cooper, we're going to be right back after this quick little break. Join us over at rockfin.com/Nomiki. We're going to continue this really thoughtful, enlightening, deep, intelligent conversation. But maybe in this short little break, go to your kitchen, grab a shot of your favorite alcohol, tequila, whatever your favorite. Take a shot. It'll help you, or whatever your a puff. I don't know what your thing is. Just, it'll help.
We'll have more positive stuff in the second half.
There you go. Yeah.
Solutions.
We're going to talk. We'll absolutely talk some solutions. I do have some questions about that. We're also going to shit on people like Tim Geithner and Larry Summers, because I want to know why the F they still thought this. I mean, Larry Summers was like writing an article last month about like the same strategy, like Earth to Larry. Like, what do you, yeah. Does Larry care about his grandchildren? Larry does not care about his grandchildren. We're going to talk about that in the next half. So join us over at rockfin.com/Nomiki.